10 reasons why conversations are important. I'm very intrigued by your answers and also my own answers. So it'll be really interesting to see how much overlap there is between our answers. Hello and welcome to Conversations About Conversations. My name is Ivan Farber, and I'm the host by a returning guest, Sam Galloway. Sam, welcome back to Conversations About Conversations.
Thanks for having me back. I must not have done too poorly the first time for you to invite me back here. So I appreciate the invite and looking forward to going through this list with you.
So that people can be refreshed as to who you are. You're a director of vendor relationships and financial services. You're the guest. Please tell me your first answer.
My first answer is to find our bearings. I think conversations are important to help us find our bearings. And I thought about this in multiple contexts, but number one, I thought about traveling internationally and how you have conversations and when you have conversations, and particularly in a country where you don't know the language. And one of the number one things you need to do is find your bearings, because you have no idea where you are and it can be very confusing. And so a lot of the conversations you have are forced out of you needing to figure out where you are and where you're going. But I thought that was so true for business and life as well, in that we can't move forward until we know where we're at. And so I think that ends up being the basis for conversations so many of the time. So number one, I've got find your bearings.
I love that. That is not on my list.
Awesome.
All right. Number one on my list is money.
Okay.
Now, don't think that I'm a shallow person and that money is the be all and end all, because it's not. But you cannot make money without conversations, whether it's making a sale, whether it's getting a job. You can't make money without a conversation. Right. So I picked that as number one. What about your second reason?
Kind of ties into your reason, and that is to gain consensus. That could be in a financial sense, but I think the anxieties and stress and all the negative emotions that pop up in our head, a lot of time can be resolved through conversation. And, you know, if you and I are having a tiff, then one of the best ways to work it out is to just have a conversation. And it is in our natural state to want to resolve those issues, right? Like we want to reduce stress. We want to be on the same page. And so I think gaining consensus is huge. So many different places where just a quick conversation to get on the same page and gain consensus leaves everybody feeling a lot more comfortable.
I like the way you're going with this. Like you're going with verbs so far is what I see. Find your bearings, gain consensus. And I thought about doing that, but my number two, and where I actually went, was very pragmatic. So I started with money. Number two for me, career, a conversation of an interview to a conversation of just being in the right job to getting promoted. To me, the number two reason, pragmatically speaking, why conversations are important is your career. In fact, how could you actually have a career without a conversation? But yeah, career. So what's your number three?
Number three is build a sense of community. So I think in our current world, you know, whether it's right or wrong is probably up for debate, but not the topic of conversation. And that very few of us are attending church on Sunday compared to, 30 years ago. So the question becomes, where do you get your sense of community from, and how do you build that? And a lot of times for me, it's just in the small conversations in the coffee shop on a Saturday morning. And it's somebody I have no relationship to, but they're in my community. We share the same neighbors and resources, and it's humbling and reassuring and comforting to have conversations with people in your small community or maybe a larger community. I don't know how you could do that. Maybe in the natural world, it's like pheromones and sense of smell or something, but as humans, I don't know how we could do that if you couldn't communicate in one way or another to say, hey, life's good. How's it on your side?
Yes, you're absolutely right. All right, my number three is management.
Okay.
I don't think you can manage others without conversations. I can think of throughout my career, the conversations that really made a difference in how I felt about my job, how I felt about the company I work for, had to do with conversations directly one-on-one with managers. I remember a manager back in my 20s who was just so nurturing to me. In order to influence others, you can't do it without conversations. People will say, oh, well, you can write emails or memos and influence people, or you through compensation. And I guess those are true. There is some kind of influence when you get an email. But the ones that made the biggest difference for me were conversations. Definitely from my list of important reasons, like if you are going to be an effective manager, you have to be effective in conversations. Right. Well, that was my number 3. What is your number 4?
My number 4 is, this one's a little loose, but I love this phrase, and it's to gather strings. And so the context is that of a bird building its nest, and that it's constantly gathering strings. And I just love that concept of conversations, in that you don't know what strings are going to be gathered until you have the conversation. For me, it's particularly applicable to fishing. And so when you're talking to someone, if you ask them what their honey hole is, or where the best fishing is, or what to use, you're never going to get the answer. But through conversation, you both end up sharing more than you probably would have, depending on the length of the conversation, right? The longer you talk, the more likely you are to give up some of those little things, because it's human nature to have that relationship aspect and to get along. And so they tell you, okay, this might be a good idea. And so you get there and you're talking to a guy on the stream, and all of a sudden now you're into some really good waters. And it's just because you're gathering strings through conversations along the way. And that people tell you what they want for Christmas. People tell you what's bothering them, but it's these little pieces that you have to be listening for. And then 6 months down the road, it's, aha, that's what they were talking about there. So for me, gathering strings, super important for conversations.
I love the way you've approached this question.
Yeah, it's like you've got the Maslow's hierarchy of like, here's, the structural components of why conversations are important, and I've got the emotional piece.
Yeah, you totally. It's poetic. The way you're approaching it. You know what's great about you, Sam, is that you have a lot of hobbies, and you do a good job bringing your hobbies into yourself and into your work and into your business and your philosophy. So I'm enjoying how you do that. That's really very neat.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Melissa, my girlfriend, would probably tell you that my many hobbies is not always, she was teasing me the other day because it's there's always a season for something, and we're rolling out of one right into the next.
All right. Well, my number 4 is problem solving.
Okay.
And I can't see how you can truly solve complex problems without others. Now I'm going to pull a not so significant problem in as an example. We just bought a house, and the owners for us had a riding mower. This is our biggest property we've ever owned. In fact, we've never really owned any material property. The property we had in Portland was a city lot. It was actually 3/4 of a city lot. Okay. So it was like 7% of an acre. And then we bought this house, and it came with 5 acres of land.
Wow, it's a big increase.
It's a big increase. It's actually, and I'm a big numbers guy, it's 58 times larger than what we had. We don't have a riding mower. So when the owners, through the realtor, said, hey, the previous owners, hey, we have a riding mower. It doesn't have a battery, but it works fine if you just get a new battery. Can we leave it there? Because otherwise they're probably moving to some place where they don't need a riding mower.
Sure.
Well, it did need a new battery. And once the new battery got in there, we found out that it didn't work at all. Like, yes, it needed a battery, but it also the engine had not been oiled properly, and it was just sunk. But luckily we have next door neighbors. And when I say next door, like, there's a bit of distance between the doors, who work on lawnmowers. So that conversation was, and actually they have some kind of race that they do with riding lawnmowers. So they're going to take it off our hands and we'll figure out what we need to do. It's not grass growing time of year. But I just thought, again, it's kind of a trivial example, but we problem solved because of the conversations we had with our neighbors.
I want to see these races. That sounds cool.
Number 4 on my list was problem solving. We're now going on to number 5. Number 5 on your list, Sam?
Number 5 is to learn a new perspective. So you don't know what you don't know. And that's a very dangerous position to be in, I think, to not know what you don't know. And I am frequently feeling this way. I think we look back to last year, it was a particularly polarizing landscape from a political standpoint and social standpoint. I think we can all agree that there were aspects to our community that we didn't know what they were facing in many different facets. But I think by having conversations, you learn to understand and appreciate and empathize with that perspective that you don't personally share. You didn't go through it. You can't know unless you have a conversation.
Now, my number 5 is friendship.
Awesome.
So I've morphed from problem solving to friendship. It's one of my role models, Dale Carnegie.
Sure.
And the classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, how to foster quality relationships and really connect with people. And it's indispensable.
Yeah. I mean, the conversations you have with friends, I can't imagine any conversations being more easy or, just it comes so naturally to all of us to have conversations with friends. And if we could translate that level of comfort into the conversations we have everywhere else, it would make a big difference.
I mean, this is only our 3rd conversation. Right. And yet, because of the quality of the conversation, I consider you a friend. And I feel like I see a future for our friendship inside of like how easy it is to talk to you.
Absolutely. And I think you do a very good job of making people feel comfortable, right? And you've talked about the 18,000 conversations you've had professionally and countless personally. And you're not passive in conversation, right? You're very active, and you coach and guide the conversation to make me feel comfortable, to make you feel comfortable, and then the listeners also feel comfortable, right? So you almost have a responsibility to do that, given your role in owning a podcast and writing a book about conversations. But that being said, it is easy to slip back into free-flowing conversation and getting off track, but you do an excellent job of coaching and guiding so that everybody involved feels comfortable. So thank you for your expertise in doing that.
You're welcome. I didn't realize that. And that's part of conversations, right? Is realizing how other people view you, because you don't know.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I remember, of course, you get through the podcast. We did our last one together, and I want to take a look at it. And I just realized how great of a job you did of keeping, I personally am easy to get off track. And, we got Jacob and Jules. And so there were a couple of times when I think it was skiing or, whatever the topic was. And you just do a great job of tying it back in. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. That's definitely a skill that I teach because I had to learn it myself. And that's actually true of a lot of the concepts in my book. Because I had to learn it because I didn't know how to do it. And I do see, if you're an effective conversation manager, you use questions skillfully. Of course, chapter 2 of the book, use questions skillfully as kind of the guide rails on a road, because it is questions that allow you to keep the conversation going, and planning, chapter 6, and foresight and being needs. I mean, all 10 chapters are in there, but thanks for the acknowledgement. All right, let's move on though to speaking of keeping things going. Let's move on to number 6. What is your number 6?
Number 6 for me is develop trust and find a partner. Developing trust is so important. And I don't know that we have a good way of doing it without communicating. I think of, showing someone a commercial real estate property. This is someone who's going to be, a tenant of yours for months, potentially years to come. You're going to have a long-term relationship with this person. You also have a lot of liability. How do you trust that person to come into this space? You talk to them. You can do applications, you can do background checks, but at the end of the day, if the face-to-face conversations you're having aren't making sense, then that's not someone you're gonna lease to. And that's true retail properties as well, and relationships and management. You're not going to work for somebody that you don't trust, hopefully. You're not going to join a company that you don't trust. Someone to trust for a long-term partner, potentially a wife, husband, spouse, very difficult. Like you were saying, you're constantly learning more about this person, and that only comes through in conversation.
That leads me to my number 6, which is very aligned, and that is romance.
Awesome.
So I would say 2 conversations that are kind of those flashbulb conversations. They're classic, is asking someone on a date and asking someone to marry you. You're not going to have that long-term partnership, long-term romantic partnership without some kind of action. Going on a date, meeting for coffee, having a meal, agreement to do that. And certainly marriage is not only agreement to that one agreement, but then it's the engagement, then it's the putting your money together and building a life together. There's lots of small agreements that conversations make romance possible.
Absolutely. And you can certainly ruin your romance through bad conversations as well.
Number 7,
creating new connections. One of the favorite phrases that I've heard is called accelerated serendipity. I think given the new work from home policy that a lot of people are going to be utilizing, I suspect these shared co-working spaces are going to be even more popular. But you come in, you use the desk, you leave for the day, and that's it. So you get new coworkers every day, new people, new industries, new organizations. And so the conversations are at a level of velocity that's much higher than if you're not opening those doors, then the serendipity doesn't take place. So it's, I don't know that you can have one without the other.
All right, my number 7 is self-talk.
Okay.
You motivate yourself. You make yourself feel a certain way. You have a conversation with yourself. You don't get out of bed without a conversation. Oh, I want to stay in. Oh, I hit snooze. Oh, I've got stuff to do. I want to get out of here. So self-talk is my number 7.
That's awesome. I had a professor who guided us through meditations at Bowling Green. She would ask the question when we all sat down, where are you? And physically, obviously, we're all sitting in the room, but mentally, we're not always present. And she would always tell us that, how many tens of thousands of thoughts a day, and probably 98% of them are the same as yesterday. And that self-talk just goes on repeat. Very difficult to turn it off. But if you could limit it, 1, 2, 5, 10%, and focus more on that 2% of unique thoughts that are actually, driving results and not just the same rehashing of yesterday's problems, wildly more efficient.
I'm not sure I totally feel comfortable with you look in the mirror and do I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, without being somewhat cynical. But I can't think of a more important conversation than the one you're having with yourself, because you are either consciously or subconsciously talking to yourself ongoingly.
The incantations, all I need is within me now.
Oh, where's that from? I have done that one.
I think that might be a Tony Robbins one.
Okay. Yes. All I need is within me now. All I need is within me now.
And it's silly, but
right.
I mean, you do that and you feel better. That's perfect tie into my next one, which is I think number 8, right?
Number 8.
Cultivate confidence. So this is so noticeable in teenagers in particular. And then you talk to a teenager, and when they're articulate and confident, it is drastically different than the teenager that is not articulate and not confident. Our ability to have conversations and to have them confidently, even when we're not feeling confident, gives us an attitude of feeling okay with ourselves, knowing we can take on the world. As we take on new conversations and new relationships, and it builds an inner confidence in ourselves that we owe to others, because like we were talking about earlier, and you do such an excellent job of this, making the other person feel comfortable in conversation, right? Nobody likes to feel uncomfortable. And when the person across from you is not confident enough to stand tall in conversation, you don't feel good about it. So you owe it to the people you work with and talk with and have relationships with to have that level of confidence. When you're having these conversations, if you're doing it the right way, you should be able to make people feel comfortable without being manipulative.
My number eight is self-expression.
Okay.
Hobbies and interests, or in my case, podcasts. Could you have a hobby without a conversation? Could you have interests without conversations? I suppose so. But I think in most cases, someone had to teach you how to fish, or you decided it was more interesting to go fishing with a buddy or hunting, or and also the conversation with yourself, like, ooh, should I try that? Should I do that? To the degree that you enjoyed it, you probably went and told someone about it, which then reinforced the enjoyment you had about fishing. Certainly without a podcast, I mean, for me, I couldn't have a conversation about conversations without a conversation. Although the first 100 episodes of the podcast, I did not have a guest on my podcast.
You just did the selfie video?
I did the selfie video, many of them in my car. Self-expression is my number 8.
It's huge. You got to be able to express yourself, and particularly in the things that you enjoy, and finding people that are like-minded. That's a really good one.
Number 9.
I have so much fun in conversation. And if you're not having fun, then you're going to avoid conversations, and it's a downward spiral, right? And so you have to have fun with it. And at the end of the day, there's so many unique people with unique stories, unique backgrounds. And so I think one of the biggest reasons for conversations is to have fun. It's amazing to learn about other people and other ideas. And the only way to do that is through conversation.
You do have fun in conversations, don't you?
I have so much fun. Maybe I have too much fun. I've been accused of being too lighthearted at times, so you got to take it that way though. And I think that people that you find are successful are really good at doing that. And so I guess I try to emulate them. And everything's multifaceted, and it all translates one way or another into different life lessons or business lessons.
My number 9 is communicate. Conversations are important because it's how we communicate. And beyond that, it's how we survive. I mean, yes. I think about how humanity has evolved from the apes and the Neanderthals. And I go back to, me hungry, me eat, me need food. Like, you had to have conversation in order to survive. And I'm glad that you mentioned Maslow earlier, because Maslow is one of my favorite psychologists and philosophers with regards to self-actualization, being at the top of Maslow's hierarchy or pyramid of needs.
Yeah.
But to thrive, to self-actualize, you can't do that without conversations.
To my number 1 or number 10, reason is it's human. Right? It is at the core of our existence. It's what separates us from the rest of the natural universe, and that we're able to communicate at such a high level. And I know personally, it doesn't always feel like I'm communicating at a high level, but it is, I was thinking about the topic at hand, and I snuck this one in at the end because I was thinking, what are conversations? What does it really mean? Why is that important? And given the pandemic and some of the social isolation over the last year, it is so critical to have these kind of conversations, to have network of people around you, a community, a sense of being in the greater good of what is humanity.
My number 10? My number 10 is to create.
Okay.
And this comes directly from the mission statement from the organization that I participated in for a number of years, Landmark Education. And Landmark Education's core philosophy is that you can create anything you want for yourself or your life if you invent it as a possibility and enroll others in your having gotten. Now, it took a whole day to get that one sentence, so I could unpack it for a long time, but I'll unpack it just briefly. So through your conversations, you can create something. Like, I'll say to you right now that this has gone on longer than I thought it would. Like, I thought it was just going to be endless, but this could be a book. Like, this episode, Sam, could be a book. Would you like to make a closing statement?
Yeah, just listening to your list, I think if you made those as the spokes on a wheel, if you fell short in any one of those, you would not be living an efficient life. But I think the more that you could keep all of those, if you're a 5 in your romance and you're a 5 in work and all the way around, then I think you would feel a sense of well-roundedness and well-being that may be hard to articulate. But if any one of those pieces were dramatically off, you would feel it and you would know it. So I think it's a good basis for, beyond conversations, just a well-being or a sense of pride in your day-to-day, to have all those components together. So you put together an excellent list.
And I feel the same way about your list. I feel it's excellent. My closing statement is simply how much I'm blown away at what we created here today. Blown away.
Thank you for putting it together. And to your point, we spent probably more time than we both expected, but I'm amazed at how many different pieces we talked about today.
Yes. So Sam, thank you for being a part of this conversation about conversations.
Thank you.